All right. Taylor, thanks for hanging out.
Thanks for having me.
So you have been mixing for Dan and Shay, front of house, for how many years now?
This is my 12th year with them.
12 years. Wow.
Yeah.
And have you been doing stuff with other artists lately, or has it been them for like 12 years?
Yeah, absolutely. This year they were a lot slower, so I got to do a little bit more contract work and fill in a little bit, variety of consoles, variety of different, types of situations. But I like to do one-offs and stuff when I can, just to keep fresh and see the other side. But I've been their guy, kind of retained by them for over a decade now, so that really is the mainstay.
Yeah, sweet. Well, I have a real softball question. Easy answer. What is your entire mixing philosophy?
Oh, great. What a great place to start.
Just open-ended.
Sure. Philosophy. I mean, what does it sound like? But I think really considering the end user is the most important thing.
Okay, the listener.
Yeah. We're not mixing. I mean, we all have a sense of vanity about it, even the most humble front of house and monitor engineers I know. But we are serving a purpose. We are a window through which the artist is seen. And it's our job to be very clear, and that doesn't necessarily mean transparent always, but that certainly means that we are there to represent the artist interests and connect them, be the conduit between them and their listeners and their fans. And anything you're doing that doesn't serve that is in the way. And there are very tweaky, advanced things we can do that do make people move their butts more to music and connect more and have more meaningful emotional moments. But if you're not serving that purpose and starting there and ending there, that's not kind of your bookend of your process, you've probably strayed. You're probably in the weeds with the tools or with your own, again, vanity or your own ideology about what it means to mix. And I think it really is just about translating the music so that people can connect to it.
So it's about the experience for the listener.
Especially in live music. Yeah, the experience is everything. I mean, they're paying their money to come see this artist. And if it doesn't sound good, and we've all experienced that. That's a real bummer, especially with how expensive tickets are nowadays, the parking, the $18 beer, all of that. To have even, I think, a subpar sonic experience at a show is really unacceptable. And to have a great experience, you're completely out of the way. Again, like a window. You have removed yourself by doing such a great job that the artist can really shine, and that even a very simple lay person that doesn't think about the tuner on the radio or whatever can emotionally connect. Yeah. And so you've done your job as well as you can, I think, if that's what you're going for. So that really is where I begin and where I like to end as well. Is do I feel good listening to this? Do I want to move? Do I want to sing? Am I having fun? Do I want to go like drink a beer on the lawn and like laugh and make a memory? That it is an experience, right? Live music is an experience. There's no way to decouple that. So yeah, that's what it is for me.
So getting technical about it, what is a good mix to you? Like, what elements make a great mix, either for you as a mixer or when you're going to a show and you hear a mix and you think that is a great mix? Like, sure. If you're picking that apart, what are the primary elements that get it there for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's like a 3-tier sort of pyramid in my brain, and vocal intelligibility is the top always. That's the most important thing. We get obsessed about our snare, and that is like, or whatever, the drum sounds. Those are the calling card for engineers, but that's sort of like the engineer to engineer handshake. That's not really for the average person. If it's great, awesome. And again, they may move their body more, but I think vocal intelligibility and the tone and the feel of the vocal, the presence of the vocal, it being loud and centered and bright enough and airy enough and not built up in any frequency, just nothing distracting about it, but it feeling immediate. The next is, I think, the rhythm section. I think the way the music feels. Again, live music, where we are moving a significant amount of air, usually, even conservative live shows, 95, 6, 7 dB. You feel that, and it's important that the way that feels to your body, that sensation supports that vocal. And then I think the bottom of the pyramid for me, and there's way more, but just this is the way my ADD brain looks at it and organizes it. The bottom of that is melody, right? And that's counter melody outside of the vocal, but sort of what in the turn in the intro of the song can you sing along to? Is it a guitar, a key hook, a motif? And then we hand that to the lead vocal in the verse, and then maybe we hand that to a guitar solo after the bridge, and back to that motif at the end of the song, chasing that. And those are the things that I think about, and that I also hope and expect when I experience live music is like if a guitar solo is buried or way louder than a lead vocal, unless that is a very specific use case where that's I don't know, the Grateful Dead maybe, or some like very guitar focused band where the guitar matters more than the vocal. Otherwise, I want those things to hand off where I don't miss any of the intricacy or any of the, the really good creamy stuff of either of those. So they both can make me feel something, right? A guitar solo can make you weep the same way a vocal can, but it's melody. It's the melody that we remember. And so I want to really see that the engineer is paying attention to that and that they know the source material well enough to serve the melody and to literally serve it back to us kind of in a way where it's balanced and appropriately seasoned, to extend the metaphor. So yeah, those are kind of my vocal and then groove and then counter melody and all the rest of the melodic sources, how they support that. And I mean, speaking to groove, that doesn't have to just be like a kick, snare, backbeat. Like that could be mostly a shaker. That could be like a train groove with brushes. It could have nothing to do with the drum kit. It could be like that Nile Rodgers ticka kind of guitar thing, and that really carries the groove with a band like Wolfpack or, someone like that you work with. Sometimes the guitar, the horns, those horn punches between vocal lines, maybe those are what really set the feel for the groove and make you sink in and move your head and move your body. So that's how we physiologically and emotionally respond to music. So those things have to come first. That's how I think about it.
And I'll add, for me, one thing, if you ask me what makes a great mix, the first thing that comes to my mind is tuning, is the not vocal tuning, but PA tuning.
Yeah, sure.
So is it pleasing to listen to or is it too harsh? And like I went to a show, amazing band, been a massive fan of them for a long time. First time seeing them live a few months ago at Bridgestone in Nashville. And it was so obnoxiously harsh sounding. Like the vocal was the loudest thing in the mix, but you couldn't understand a word they were saying. So like it was
That's an
rough.
important caveat that volume and intensity don't equal intelligibility at all. Those things can be very disparate.
Yeah. And I mean my analysis is there's way too much 2 to 4K in the PA.
Common.
Yeah.
That's the range.
And when I had to put earplugs in. I almost never wear earplugs.
I try not to as well.
Because I want to hear it.
Me too.
Exactly the way it is. And when I mix, I'm not mixing too loud to where I need them.
If I'm fatigued, other people are too. So
exactly.
We try
you don't want to hurt anyone's ears.
We try to live just sub 100 maybe. We peak up a little over it, and that's the sweet spot for most people in most positions. So
exactly.
That's
and I feel like your show generally is a little bit hotter than my show.
It can. Yeah. The last time we were in the same room, you were in a support slot, so there was a natural sort of I say hierarchy is a gross word, but you know what I mean. Like that, it's not uncommon for an opener to a support to a headliner.
Right. I couldn't have been louder than you. Wouldn't let me be louder than you.
Yeah, it just would probably not be the thing. Yeah, it would be kind of awkward, I think, all around. But
and that was the Ben Rector
and the crowd too, right?
Ben Rector, Dan Shay tour for anyone.
Yes.
Wondering what we're talking about.
And Ben had a lot of very Ben. I always had fans come up and. Dan and Shay's cool, but we love Ben Rector. And I'm like, I love them both, but I love Ben too. Like I've always listened to Ben. I listened to Ben before I really knew who Dan and Shay were. Like, but part of that as well is and we're meandering, but that's good. Part of it is mixing to the crowd. I know there's some old school guys that will say, you just stay at this number, you pin this number and make them come to you. And I think that there is some truth in that, but I don't think that that's an absolute black and white rule. I think you also have to be considerate to the fact that, 12,000, 18,000 screaming fans, especially if they're teenagers and young 20-somethings that have those full, loud, excitable, higher-pitched voices, right, and youthful exuberance in rooms like Bridgestone that are designed for sports. So there is this haystack from 1 to 2K and really 2 to 4K in those rooms built in. That is unfortunately the only consideration that was at all part of the equation in building the room was how do we make sports sound loud? And where do people cheer? And it's that frequency range, right? So the surfaces, the shape of the room, that's, if anything was considered in most of the rooms we mix in, it is how to make that haystack more of a haystack, which is not great for us and not great for shows or PA tuning that don't really take careful consideration.
Right.
We circled back. My only point in saying that was to say, if more of those fans are there to see naturally the headliner, you kind of have to meet them to some degree where they are. But that's tough when you don't want to berate people in that frequency range, which, as you mentioned, you went to a show recently where that happened. Bridgestone is a classic example of a room that is, I have seen some great shows and I've mixed some shows I'm very proud of in that room. I have heard some top 40, top 20, top whatever acts sound very not great in that room. And I even know they have great engineers, but these rooms are tough, right? Mm-hmm. We do so much to negate physics, but it always wins and it makes us, it's kind of humble servant no matter what. But I do think great engineers, great mixes, and great sources, there are ways to overcome that to provide intelligibility and to provide emotionally impactful live mixes in almost every situation.
Yeah.
And the PA tuning is a huge part of that, having a great systems engineer, just being cognizant and having those things work in concert. The mix and the target curve, it doesn't have to be literal, but the ethos of the mix engineer and of the artist, those things kind of translating and being connected to the systems engineer rather than any of those things fighting against one another. When those things start to align, that's when I think it's a much easier gig for us. And I think and I think folks get more money out of their ticket sales as a result too. It's not talked about enough, I don't think, but I think that it is important for those, the artist's vision to the engineers, sort of carrying that and clarifying that and passing it to a systems engineer, to millions of watts into a 50,000 square foot room or whatever. If we don't work together, that's just not, it's not going to be optimal, and it might be pretty bad. you know?
Well, the show I went to, I was looking forward to going to, and it was so bad. Yeah, I had to wear earplugs, but my wife and I walked out and hung out on the concourse for half of the show. Because it's
out of the direct line of the PA, so you didn't have all of that.
Well, yeah, we're just outside, just like getting something to eat and
it probably sounded as good or better out there.
And then we waited until they hit a couple of the songs we really wanted to hear. We went back in for that. But it was like I didn't pay to hear half a show. You know?
Yeah.
And it was unlistenable. It was. So,
and when we work in
tough.
it 100 days, 200 days out of the year, even 50. You have to really want to see a band to go see them, right? There are those rare among us that just live for live music and do it, for fun every night. But those of us that work in it, a lot of times, we have to really be motivated to spend our money to go see what we already do.
Yeah.
And it's tough not to be critical of, right? It's tough to enjoy it. It's tough to turn your technical brain off. So you hope it's at least like there's a pretty low bar of just being good enough.
It was to the point though where like my wife was like, yeah, I can't hear anything.
Yeah, and mine too.
Awful.
They're a great litmus test where, they're around us and probably inundated and annoyed by our geek nerd talk and speak and, the bass is to whatever 60 hertz is, the tweaky stuff we talk about. They are next to that and they maybe experience some of that, unfortunately for them. But they're still lay people, and when they hear something, when they really like or don't like something, that band sounded great. That guy didn't sound very good, but you guys sounded good. It's like, yeah, that's what I do. Like you're understanding the difference. Yeah. Hey, when I came to see you guys at Bridgestone 2 years ago, it didn't sound like this. Why does XYZ artist name? Why do they sound like this tonight? So, and I've had even professional mix engineer friends of mine, colleagues who mix top 40 songs and whose songs, again, you may hear on the radio on the way home. Very accomplished, great guy, Grammy nominated dudes. Go see shows at Bridgestone. This is not a Bridgestone problem. It's just the example native to us. But
arenas,
at arena level shows, very, very fantastic, huge artists there that I love, that I would love to mix and say, is the room just bad? Or, they were in the round. Can you just not make in the round sound good? Or can you just not make it sound that good live? And I'm like, no, come out to my show next time. Like, it's not going to sound just like a record, but you are going to hear it all and it's going to feel like music to you. And you deal with music every day like I do. And that's the purpose. There are so many great engineers. Sometimes I feel like I am drowning to keep up with them, and so much technology and so many tips and tricks. But there really are a lot of great acts that could sound better too. We have our work cut out for us always. So I think it's so important that we take our job seriously and that we serve the artist and serve that listener that spent that money, so that they can have an unhindered, unencumbered experience. Because the first thing that will take them out of that experience, that memory they're making, is if it doesn't sound at least pretty good. And if there's anything distracting. And
I think of this in terms of percentages for me. I wonder what you would say your threshold of acceptable an acceptable mix is. For me, I feel like I'm never at 100%. I'm like the best show is like 95%. And I feel like really good, but you can never get it perfect.
Yep, I would agree.
So I'd say 95% is like the ideal, and that's maybe an outdoor show with no reflections.
Yeah, exactly.
And the PA is like tuned perfectly.
Yep, it's a PA you want. It's hung well. Yes.
Yeah, and then, but sometimes on tour I'll find myself at like 75%, and I'm like scared, but I know it's acceptable. Yeah. And like not a single person in the crowd is going to really notice the difference. Beyond that, they'll feel it. They'll feel it when it's like up to 95%. They're like, there's something magical happening. But 75%, it's all intelligible. It's musical. People are having a good time.
Man.
I get scared when I drop below that.
100%.
Then it's like
70% was the number in my head as soon as you
Okay.
started the conversation, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
I hope that I'm never mixing under 80, but there are those
Right.
days, right? And it's easy to blame the circumstances. Sometimes you might just have like a head cold, or you just might. I mean, our own
or
state,
your ears are feeling
fatigued,
weird.
or
Yeah.
sure, any of that. You said a lot of things that are exciting to me there. That idea, I think we're in the same place, the ballpark of percentage, and I think that like if I feel like the artist is being done under like 70% of what I feel like is coming off the stage,
Yeah.
I want to leave. I'm so disappointed.
Right, yeah.
But I think as long as we're there, it's out of the way. It may not be adding, we may not be additive, but we are not subtractive to the experience at that point. I think
Yeah.
that is the minimum bar that we have to cross as engineers. And if we're not, then we need to go back and we need to practice. We need to learn. We need to try harder. We need to work on it more.
And there's objective and that, I would say
yeah.
up to 70% is objectively good or bad.
I think pretty much I would agree. Yeah, I think
when you
so.
talk about intelligibility and somewhat of a target curve,
Yeah,
like
harshness.
there are ways to measure that.
100%.
Right?
Yeah, I would completely agree. And while measurements are definitely just diagnostic tools,
Right,
and really don't tell you how it actually sounds in a room, I would agree that I think you and I both are experienced enough and capable enough engineers. We could probably look at something without hearing it and go, yeah, I want to go in that room, or I think I'm good. I think I'll stay in the concourse,
Yeah.
and probably be pretty correct, at least to our preferences and also to that objective threshold most of the time. I do think when we get above that 90%, I think we have, like you said, there's pixie dust, there's fairy dust, there's magic, and no one will know it or maybe give us credit, and it's not a point of pride necessarily. It's just, I think we are taking what the stage, the artists and musicians are giving us and creating an even easier bridge, an even easier, wider open door to invite, the layperson, the crowd, the fan into an intimate moment with the artist. An even easier path, just a slippery little slide for them to just scoot right down and just be in this glow kind of with the artist and create that memory, create that experience. That is so special. And that's like probably a lot of what you and I grew up doing as maybe not even a 9, 8, 9, 10-year-old, teenagers, early adults, having those magical moments with music we care a lot about, and just being like, I want to do this. I want to help be a part of that. Like I hope engineers, a lot of folks listening to this, if they do, I hope they play something and they have that experience of connecting and being a musician in some way, because I think that's invaluable. That's very informative experience to understand the other side of the snake, the other side of the stage. But we all have that passion connected to making music. And when we feel like we are additive, when we feel like we have done our best to make that even better than what's already there. Again, to season it, the beautiful ingredients from the farmer's market, to season them to perfection or sear them to perfection, or serve them at just the right temperature, at just the right setting with the right ambience. That's special. Like that's the high that gets all of us sort of infected with wanting to be a part of live music, is looking around and seeing people with their flashlights out or singing along to where at 100 dB you are as loud as the crowd, and kind of one-to-one with them. You're not over them. You're not beating them. They are contributing as much to the experience. That's super cool. That's special, and that is the goal, I think. Yeah. That is what we're aiming to do. But yeah, when you're sub 70, it's a real bummer, and we hope we are not, right?
Oh, I know.
And I thought about this on the way here. This may be a caveat to a totally new place for us, but to make this about DLive.
Yeah.
And the fact that I had like a lot of outboard and I was on a very premium console before this year.
So explain that a little bit more for people that aren't familiar.
Sure.
When we toured together a year ago,
yep,
you had a large console.
Yeah. Again, so many years with the artist, I had a PM that trusted me. I was to a place where I could, not like a blank check, but if I asked for tools, they cared a lot. We'll come back to this, I'm sure, but Dan Smyers of Dan and Shay produces the records. He's at least co-producer on every record they've done. He tunes the vocals and edits the instruments. He records and engineers a lot of it, or works with engineers. He knows every transient. I mean, he knows every detail of the records and of their music and their arrangements, the playback sessions, all of that. He is across every detail, like very few artists I know. And thankfully, I've been able to engender a pretty large amount of trust from him, just from the years of us working together, and him pushing me to be better and me showing up and matching that and saying, yes, improve. Him seeing that in me and that drive, that just means I've gotten some leash to have some fun tools. And I had a lot of fun tools last year.
Yeah.
The beginning of the year, I mean, I had two 16-channel summing mixers, again, a very premium console, a lot of tube gear.
You had 4 racks,
Yeah,
like 22 space?
two threes. So 246 space racks, right? So whatever, whatever that 92 or 82, whatever the math is.
Yeah.
92, I guess. Math's
A
hard.
spaceship. You had a spaceship.
Yeah, and then I had a dual 12 bay under the console too that was full. So we were over 100 RU of outboard
gear.
Yeah.
And so then this year,
the challenge was how much of that experience for fans can I get? We're not in an A or even B touring config. We are fly dates, privates, one-offs. The artist is between record cycles, between management. They are in no place to be spending whatever $45,000 a week on an audio package that we take out and we tour. It needs to be much leaner than that. It needs to be deployable and drivable by fewer people, right? And we need to do it with sort of a skeleton crew so that, and it needs to be repeatable still, right? They're a Grammy-winning artist. They still need to have a great experience on stage and believe that I'm giving their fans a great experience out front. But we need to do it lighter, leaner, simpler, quicker, and way more affordably. So that is the one downside of having all the toys I had last year is you sometimes must come back from that. But the challenge for me was amazing. It was, what platform do you want to pick that you can learn and pick up in time, to do these dozen at most shows or whatever this year that will keep a very high level of service to the artist and to their fans, a very high level, with the mix and a very high, very repeatable. And in sometimes where we can't carry it, where I PM'd this year and where I can't sell anyone on trucking our own package, where I can fly into a package built by a local vendor that I don't know from anybody and trust that it is going to be deployed in a way that I am going to be able to execute that day. Both sides of the snake. And we had even a different playback engineer, a different monitor engineer most shows. So I had to build that side and make sure that was also able to integrate just, and go and give the artist a turnkey experience close to hopefully what they're used to, maybe 85%, 90% of what they toured with last year when cost was no object, when we had, Neve preamps in the rack, we had all the accent in the world, and we had, et cetera, et cetera. Everything was loomed and loads of audio techs and our own PA we're carrying. A very stark difference. Yeah. And DLive was the platform I landed on ultimately. And it was the most fun challenge that I've done in years as mixing for the same artist. I really encourage folks like me that are kind of tenured, salaried, retained, whatever with an artist and have been for a long time to find a way to challenge yourself. Even if it's in the off season, just with virtual, just completely reset your rig. Don't get comfortable because that is where like innovation is born and where you start to find ways maybe you weren't doing enough and ways you can do more, or just that you can become a better engineer, right? Because your sources are going to be largely the same. And if your control for those sources and your workflow always stays the same or is only challenged 5% per tour cycle, I do think you're leaving a lot of room for growth on the table. And I've been guilty of that plenty of times. But that was the mission this year. And so I took it as an opportunity rather than a disappointment. And that was the way I ran with it. And DLive is where I landed. And I'm so glad I did. It was an awesome challenge. And what I've learned from that, first off, is that the platform sounds amazing. I think the summing is awesome. I think the onboard tools are great, and that the folks at DLive, at Allen and Heath, are listening to engineers and creating sort of an engineer-first approach to the console, both in terms of how it drives, but especially in the suite of tools and processing. That's really the thing. Engineers like me, we want a lot of great sounding processing. We want the processing tools we're used to or flavors that we're used to. I want to just be able to deploy a console and know that it's going to sound great. And I don't feel that way about a lot of manufacturers. I don't feel like there are a lot of vanilla desks out there that get you into that 90th percentile we were talking about of a mix, where the ceiling is that high. And you can reach that if you can rise to that occasion. It's an amazing sounding platform, and that is what I care about first and foremost. But it also is quite easy to learn and use, and it is very capable and does most of what any of us need it to do. And I think that that's an interesting point for younger engineers. If you can get your artist to jump from, the band in the box thing, the rack mixer, up to DLive, you have no excuses. And if you are not competing with the headliner, even if they're on the Swankiest console, all the outboard, if you're not getting within 10% of them, 8%, 6%, I don't want to say you're the problem, but you have room to learn. Because the console has the threshold to give you that. There is ceiling there. I know it. I did it. I had to do it, right? So the tools on the console, the summing, even without a lake, without any outboard, without any system processor, minimal basic RF, a basic mic package. I toured only, with a very common basic mic package this year that is very ubiquitous and nothing fancy. A couple $400 ribbon mics. That was the nicest mic that I had on stage, right? $100 capsules for my stars, nothing fancy, no super fancy $1,200 capsule here and $2,000 kick mic and none of that stuff at all. No bells, whistles. And I think I got within 90, maybe even 7% of where I was last year, just through grit, innovation, working at it, and realizing that you are the asset and your ears are the asset. So if you can't do that with a vanilla D-Live package, you have room to grow. As do I, as do you, right? We all do, but you have room to grow. And that is what I would encourage younger engineers to do, is like leave the plugin server behind. You can lust after the outboard, because I love the outboard. I love my tubes and my transformers. But that single piece or three of outboard on your mix bus won't get you to 90%. It may get you from 95 to 97 or 8, or it may seem like it does to you and motivate you to get there. But it is not, that won't get you there. It's about your ears, your use of the tool set in front of you. And I really encourage people to seek out a console platform where they feel like those tools are there for them. And that may be different for every driver, but I know to me and to my ears and to the discerning engineers around me that I work with, and folks like you too, that I really trust and that I would trust to sub in for me one-to-one. A lot of us have landed on a package like this and on this D-Live platform because the tools available to us on the desk without leaving the desk are good enough and sound good enough to get it there, especially if your source is decent, without any other fancy anything. No excuses. You can make it sound like a record with this console. And if you can't, it's a you problem. Most of the time, right? There are always exceptions, but I know you and I even have done that in situations where the PA, the room, are really not doing us any favors. The mic package was not right. The backline was not great that day. And if the artist rises above, we meet them there, and the show is a great show still, most of the time, right? Mm-hmm. This platform affords us that absolutely without any supplementation. And I think that is the greatest feather in the cap for how D-Live fits into the live ecosystem, and why I would recommend it to anybody really right now. I think that is the greatest thing about this console platform, is that it sounds really good, and the plugins built in and the processing, the summation, the bus-to-bus processing, Dyne 8, it all sounds really good. You can abuse it, you can mess it up, you can have a bad mix with it still, sure. It doesn't auto mix for you, but it is a great sounding platform. And if you are a competent mixer, you will have a great mix with nothing else going on, with no waves, no UAD, no outboard, no toys, no fancy mics. You can do it. I know, because I had to this year. So.
Yeah. So with Dan and Shay, what elements for their show in the mix are the hardest to get right?
Great question. I mentioned earlier that Dan is producer, right?
Yeah.
Is a brilliant producer, brilliant mind. Yeah. So
everything.
Well, and that's the thing, is he would like to hear everything, right? Yeah. And he knows all those details. And I want to respect that and translate as much of that as I can, given who is on stage and given the format we're in and the way the show and the PA, the room, as much as is appropriate. That means there's a lot of content is really my biggest challenge. Is there is a lot of playback, and there's a lot coming from the live band. It's not like everything is faked from a computer karaoke situation. It's not like that at all. But there's a lot of supplementation and a lot of really nice subtle musical moments and reinforcement that happens in playback to support what's happening live, right? So we spent a lot of time carefully crafting a show where we can represent a lot of that. But that is a great challenge, right? Is making room and creating space for all this supplementative playback information and 6 people on stage, a huge, amazing, wide-ranging voice like Shay, with a kind of permanent baritone harmony with Dan under him too. So that is maybe like the initial most difficult thing that someone who doesn't know the music well could get wrong. They could just turn it into like karaoke DJ pop country and just have like way too much playback, or just leave it on the table and the live band sounds good and that's cool. And that's where I start. I would say that's 80% of my mix, but you're still missing that kind of final connective tissue to really emotionally take it over the top. Mm-hmm. And you're leaving a lot of carefully crafted little bits and pieces that I know the artist and that I care a lot about and that we expect to hear. So that's the great challenge, is tucking those playback elements and those really well-produced moments that don't make sense to reproduce with a live band, tucking those into the live band so they are there to support and provide feel and texture, but aren't ever distracting you from what's happening in front of you. Or it's like, oh, that fiddle that no one's playing on stage is really loud, and that doesn't make any sense. We would never want to approach the show like that. So I think that's the first thing is balancing playback and live. And I do a lot of side chaining to that degree, and a lot of I beat up the playback sometimes significantly to make it fit into the live elements, rather than the other way around. Trying to take like an SM58 cap or whatever, a 57 on a snare, whatever it is you have, and make it sound like a mastered stem is usually not the way to me. That usually you end up chasing your tail, and that's a lot more work than working the other way, which is take the stems and just calm them a little bit and focus them and maybe target the information you're getting from those record stems into live sources a little bit more. But the two inform one another, and that's powerful too. It means my live band needs to sound more like a record. I have to push that snare mic, that lead vocal closer to something that is record quality, which I would want to anyway. I'm a studio guy like you are. That is what I expect and what I want to see. I want to be pushing those boundaries of live music to studio. But those two things definitely are tests and sharpen one another sort of in a really cool, practical way. Other than that, the next thing is just Shay's vocal, because it's awesome, but it's wide ranging and it's very acrobatic. He's an incredible vocalist. He does cup a little bit, and obviously there's proximity live eating a mic.
But that means by cupping,
he just
the way he
cup
holds
the capsule
the mic.
sometimes. Sure, yeah, as many artists do.
Which changes.
The obviously the frequency response. And he and Dan both like to be on a thrust in front of the PA a lot too. So those are kind of some of the bigger challenges. Is to me, Shay Mooney, I think, is a generational voice. I would put him up there with anyone, with an Adele or whoever. I really think he is that level of vocal. In a room this size, he will blow your ears out with just power and tone, without any tuning, any help, anything. He's an amazing vocalist. And representing that, right, is tough sometimes. And it's, like you said, when you get below that 70% mark or mixing wherever, you start to get scared. That is the anxiety I feel, just handling something precious and wanting to do it justice and caring so much about that. That kid has a gift and an amazing voice, and it's important to me to translate that. So it's also an amazing source. So I don't know that it's like the most challenging thing, right? You can not do a lot to it, and it sounds really nice, but to get it to sound like a record and to push it all the way, to do that with any live vocal on a capsule, transmitted through a radio wave, going through multiple stages of conversion, through hundreds of feet of cable, back through a PA into a huge room, all of those types of not ideal things we deal with live sound, to really make that sound close to a record. I think there's a lot of really fine-tuned work that has to be done there. Yeah. So, that's what I would say is balancing stems to live and in the vocal work. In the vocal balance too, right? Vocal stems, Dan's vocal, the backing vocals on stage, and Shay's vocal, building that, because that's iconic to their sound, is like these big, almost Beach Boys-y inspired sort of fat vocal stacks, and making those sound as big as they do on a record and giving them the space in the mix to sound that big without them being distracting or taking away from energy of a live band and of a backbeat. So
you mentioned side chaining stuff. So are you using that because it's such a dense mix? So is that helping you get better vocal clarity?
Yeah, I think that's helping me get better clarity all around. Like that's
what are you triggering? So you talk about side chain, like tucking the tracks out of the way, which means you're compressing them but the side chain is triggered from other sources. So what sources do you let trigger?
That's a great question. It really depends on my sort of bus to bus workflow per year.
Yeah.
Last year I was very bus to bus, on a previous platform, and I like that a lot. And I was using some outboard summing too, so there were limitations to what I could and couldn't do, and when I wanted to do that. This year being all in the box, if you will.
Were you using group to group routing
this year?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and I built my file on bus to bus architecture and workflow, but group to group hadn't been unlocked in DLive yet. I'm grateful for it, and I hope to rebuild with group to group next year. But instead, I did track to group, group to aux to matrix back into the stereo mix channel, and then that back into a left, right, subfill, delay, etc. matrix. So you and I talked about that early on. I was putting my file. I kind of added by hitting a matrix and then using the matrix as an external in into the mix bus on the console. That got me an extra level of bus hierarchy before group to group existed. So my current show file is still like that. I will change that now that group to group exists. But
and to be clear for anyone watching, you do not need to do this anymore.
Not
with
at all.
The latest firmware on DLive, we allowed group to group routing.
And there may be work workflows where some of that is still actually helpful. If you're doing like front house monitor mix and a broadcast mix all off of the same desk, shelling your groups like that and having one more layer and one more layer to add those room mics in, or add, voiceover or cue in or something for, a DP, like those types of shells can be really helpful. And the console, even before the group to group workflow, did that. So I think that's really cool. Some consoles, some big manufacturers out there don't allow bus to bus architecture. If I'm mixing in the box, studio mixing, I use group to group. My kicks might go to a kick bus that goes to a drum bus, that goes to a music bus, that goes to a mix bus, that then maybe gets mastered or whatever, right? So that is a very common workflow for most, not all, but most engineers.
Yeah.
It's a cool challenge to strip that away and just be like, here's 90 tracks and they go to a left, right, and that's it. But I do think for me in my workflow, I really think bus and group architecture is prized and gets me where I want to go faster, but also better. So, but you asked about side chaining.
Right.
This is how it's going to be. It's okay. It's because we love what we do and we're excited about it, and excited about this platform.
I asked because my follow-up question has to do with, I want you to explain your vocal chain.
Yeah. Okay.
And so how are you making space for the vocal? Sure. And then what is your vocal chain? Getting super nerdy.
Yeah. So in the nerdy stuff, side chaining, we'll start with playback. We'll segue to vocal. So with playback stuff, what I would commonly do is like if I have I've broken out playback as much as I'm allowed. It depends year to year. This year I had 16 channels. Last year I had 32. And the point of that, again, was just to represent it and give it space. It wasn't because we have so much coming from it. It was just rather than perk, and that's like a lot of complex information coming from playback. It was like, here's like all of our LF perk, here's all of our like 2 and 4 snare backbeat, and then here's all of our top loops and lifters, stuff like that. And you can break it out however you want, but having 3 stereo pair, 6 channels of percussion coming from playback was really cool, because I mean, if there's an intro where it's or whatever in a backbeat, that can be at a completely different level and sit on a different channel than shakers and tambourines in the last chorus that are just adding some subdivision and some swoosh and energy. Yeah. Because those things serve a very different musical purpose. So that's how I'm thinking about playback, and that's why I would break it out more.
Because they're individual instruments.
They are. Yeah,
and
all of those things are instruments.
It's that's the best way to think about playback. It doesn't matter that it's coming from a computer.
Yep.
It's another instrument coming from the stage.
Yeah. And even, a little tip to folks who are on, say, like a Play Audio 12 or a 10-channel, 12-channel playback rig, band in a box. I would encourage folks not to do drums, guitars, keys. I would even, especially with things like guitars and keys, I would consider like a rhythm, musical rhythm and like musical melody. Because those, if there are melody moments in playback, for a pop punk band or a pop band or something where there's like this little motif, key, distorted whirly thing, or this guitar part that no one's playing on stage or that's really coming from playback, you want that on its own fader, and you do not want to process that the same way as chugga guitars or diamonds, right? Those are, or just chord blocking.
Well, and when you ride it up, you don't want all that stuff to come
that
with
whole
it.
bed of just mid-range 200 to 800 just thick to just 2x4 take all the space up, right? So that is just to explain my ethos and why I like playback split out when it's a luxury, but when I'm able to have it, that's why. Side chaining, I will commonly, taking the live kick group or the live snare group and side chaining maybe the whole live drum group and side chaining some of the playback percussion off of that so that when playback percussion is the only rhythmic element, it carries and it has more room to bloom and be full range. But whenever the drummer plays, it steps on it a little bit, or at least steps on the front of the transient. That cuts down on flamming between the two, because even the best drummer, that happens sometimes. So it cuts down on some of that, misaligned transient information between laser accurate, very bright playback information and a live drum kit and a live player. It helps blur that a little bit, but it also means the drummer, I can decide how much the live player is the boss, and they can command the playback stems a little bit. And I can choose how much they win, even on a song-to-song basis with scenes if I want to, if you want to get that tweaky and nerdy, which is amazing. And so that is an example where I would sidechain, or I may take if I have a live electric guitar group, I may sidechain the guitars and keys from playback, or some of that, again, at least rhythm information, mid-range musical sustain, key, piano, guitar, whatever information, pads, and sidechain that off to the live guitars, so that those guitars, when they are chugging, when they are playing a motif, a rhythmic element, or something that's just iconic because it's being represented on stage by a live player, it commands that whole group, and that food group gets dominated by it a little bit more than those things competing. And then when it's not, and playback is providing quite a bit of a bed, it's allowed to bloom more and allowed space. So I don't want to say that's auto mixing, but sidechaining like that carefully. It's an advanced technique. You don't start there, right? That's the last 10% or whatever. When you've done everything else in the EQ and the comp and per channel and the channel balance and the fader balance and the effects, all that stuff's good. We can start going, yeah, but in this song or in this part of this song, I wish I had a little more of this, or I wish I had a little less of this. But if I just turn it up or down, it's not the effect I'm looking for. I need it to handshake back and forth. But if I babysit those faders, I'm not writing my vocal the way I need to, right? I only have two hands. It's a way to sort of build some of that into the mix. And it creates movement. People sometimes feel compression squashes movement out, but when it's done well and correctly, it can create energy or even emphasize energy that's already there. I think great engineers know that and use compression that way rather than this like, on Harvest Moon, there was no compression ever, and that's what we need to get back to. It's like everything has come so far from that, and the way we listen to music, AirPods or, in-ears or live PAs, the technology has just done this, and it is so advanced now, and it is so good in full range. Things like compression are your friend. They're a great tool to learn and to master. So that is the way I would sidechain musical elements. Now, as far as vocals, and this is a cool trick that a lot of people do. It's not like groundbreaking or earth-shattering, but it may be the first some folks are hearing about it, and it's something I use frequently. And I use Allen and Heath Dynate for this, actually, to the best success of anything I've done other than like Tweaky Pro Tools plugins. Live, this is the best iteration I've used for this, which is to put Dynate on my band group, or on my music bus, right? So I end up having a bus like music that doesn't have drums in it, so it doesn't affect my, my rhythm 2 and 4.
So
and
no
sometimes
transient
correct, and sometimes no bass. That's dependent, but really it's all your guitars, keys, again, all the sustain stuff, anything that would really compete with a vocal, 200 to 5K, like the stuff that really is in that range. And I would
just
put
that small range.
Yeah, just that little baby range, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit of music. But really where a vocal may exist and where a vocal needs space to bloom and cut, applying a Dynate to that band group, to that music group, right? And having it maybe only the mid-range bands sidechained from the lead vocal or from your vocal group. That means that every time the vocalist is singing, and you can choose the timing constants to be very musical, you can choose the threshold to only do a little bit, but you can... And then you can add a little makeup gain, right? If you're actually doing a good bit. Right. So now your music maybe got a dB and a half louder. So the guitars, the keys, you're hearing more of those all the time. But as soon as the vocalist comes up, the vocal is competing even less than before with those elements that are masking that same frequency range. So that is a great automatic way to make the show that much better, to where you hear more of what you need to hear. I talked about chasing melody earlier, and this gets you on that path and even kind of automatically tips your mix in that direction and helps you. There's still fader moves to be done, but if the vocalist, and mine does, Shay does this a lot, wants to vocalize and ad-lib over the guitar solo, we probably should prize that over the solo. But it'd be cool if we could hear both, and the whole rest of the band should still be there. They shouldn't get tiny. And this little sidechain trick sometimes helps me create room for that, what I think is an iconic special vocal, to be larger than life, and to be, even if you're at the 300s, the 400s in that arena, that vocal is still right here. And there are, to me, PAs and deployments that I think do that better than others. But this console built in without supplementation has the tools to really help you do that. And I think that's a very clever way, is using Dynate and sidechaining some of the bands. You can also sidechain like the LF band on your bass group from your kick, and that's again a very common mixed trick guy. It's not something that I always think is necessary. It's very much band or even song and genre and dependent. So I think it's important not to start out with these things. I think it's important to build a great mix and then try these tools and see if they can, these little tricks, have them in your toolbox and then deploy them to see if you can get a little more of what you're looking for out of them and be a little more record-like, a little more energy, serve the artist, the song a little more. But that's another great way to just control maybe 60, 70 and down on the bass guitar. The level of the bass guitar gets to come up. The bass guitar gets to take up that space when there's not kick and almost bloom out of the kick pedal, but it doesn't sit on top of because there's definitely, we think about transient with a kick and we think about it being like 2K, 5K, 6K, 8K. And that snap and that attack is very important, but there is transient at 60 hertz and it's cool. I mean, you can get that fast in an arena. It's the toughest place to control low in, right? Sometimes it's an 8, a 10, a 12-second RT60 at 63 hertz in some of these rooms you and I mix. And that sucks. Hockey arena is even worse, right? The transmission over ice. I mean, it's cold. Like there's a lot of things working against you and working against low frequencies sounding tight. So making room there, even if it's just momentary room for 15, 20, 30 milliseconds for the transient at 50, 60, 80 hertz to punch through, but then the bass guitar to have never been missed. That almost feels like a magic trick, and again, it's not always right, and these are the things too that if you mix in a controlled room like this on monitors, you may not even need. They may seem like overkill, or they may seem like you're over-engineering a solution. But then you take it out on the road and you know how good the mix sounded in a controlled room, which is something, by the way, I would really encourage young engineers to do when you're able to. And why this format rules is the CTI is 100%, an Allen and Heath console with all of the paths, all of the processing, the DSP of an S5000, of any size console, and it translates one-to-one to those. The only difference is like your tactile response, your ergonomics, but you're not lopping off like the last 30% of your DSP to go from one size console to another, which a lot of manufacturers, I think actually, honestly, every other manufacturer kind of does. You're not losing anything building on a small console. So get this tiny console a day, a week early from your vendor. Have them, you can pay a rehearsal rate probably and get hooked up, especially if you're a smaller act. They may even give it to you for a week, or go into the shop and get on headphones you love, or get in a controlled room with near fields, even better. Get virtual and work on the mix that way. So then when you take it to these not ideal rooms and PAs and poor deployments, your mix isn't the problem and you trust your mix. That is game changing. I know you've done it. I know I've done it. And you can compare to the masters. You can compare to other sources in real time on a listening source that you believe. And you can believe what you're doing, and you can trust like that you're doing the song, the set, the artist justice in a controlled environment. And if you start there, the difference in what you can achieve is wild. Even for very, seasoned engineers, I think you are leaving, again, a lot on the table to not approach a mix like that. And a lot of the great rehearsal facilities have started adding these side rooms like this for the front of house engineer to go, F off in this little quiet room and do that during production rehearsals or whatever. But I would really encourage folks to work like that. And I think this console is special and unique and shines in that there's this, 24, 26 to 8 pound. It's lightweight.
Yeah, it's less than 25 pounds.
Backpack, weight, size, surface that has fewer faders and fewer encoders, but otherwise has everything and translates one-to-one of the largest size D-Live console. I don't think any other manufacturer affords that. And you can't fit it. You can't flip it in the corner of a shop. You can't flip a huge full-size Surface in your studio in front of monitors.
You can't put it in your Honda Accord.
Nope, you can't. You've delivered this Surface to me in your Honda Accord before, and had no problem getting it in a mix rack in and out.
It's the Surface and the mix rack, obviously. But the mix racks are all...
Yeah. Again, things that can fly under 50 pounds, and then your show gets to be consistent, right? If your artist will rent this year round, and this will segue us into that whole world, but the consistency you can provide an artist. I mean, I would even encourage people young growing acts, don't hire a monitor engineer yet. I think you should have one, but don't hire one yet. Don't go from band in the box to 2 and 3 consoles or whatever. The first thing you should do is try to step up into a single D-Live console and run everything from one console and carry it everywhere with you. Because then every day it's getting better, and that one engineer always has hands-on to make it better for you. And when you're able to grow to 2 engineers and 2 consoles, that's a huge step up. But if you end up with one of these and then you're band in the box, you've separated and segregated those worlds in a way where young acts and backline problems, and you can't troubleshoot and fix those things from a single point. If you have one engineer you trust and you have one surface that you believe in, I think that a lot of bands can go really far. A lot of acts can have great shows, great sets like that, great intermixes. I mean, I subbed in kind of in your wake, and you set me up for success extremely well. But for a Ben Rector show, incredible artist, just physically, musically, what he puts out is awesome, and he has a great band. I was in an airline hangar, private like airport hangar, with some not high quality small boxes that were not really enough, right?
Underpowered.
They could have been brown boxes, whatever boxes you like. It doesn't matter. They were just not enough. And I had a great show, and everyone had a great time. And I did all of it from one D-Live Surface. But I got to be kind of the master engineer and the mastermind and inform all those decisions. And again, I was very set up for success. I owe you, for that one, for helping me out with all the tools I needed. But I built it, in my mix room on a small surface, and I made sure that I could make the show work on the smallest surface, on the least common denominator of D-Live. And it translated beautifully to, I think I was on maybe a C3500 that night. I had all these extra faders.
Yeah, you just get more faders.
And in no time, in 5 minutes, I filled out those faders and filled out the encoders on the desk. Having not worked on that size surface yet, I very quickly and very intuitively, for maybe the first time that time, was able to expand onto that size surface, which is again a testament to how fun it is to roll out on these different size surfaces. The challenge of being on the smallest, but if you build your show on the smallest in a controlled room and you believe it sounds great, everything's easy then. Like you should, there's no excuse, and you are the limiting factor. And you really can have a great show anywhere. You could take this thing to Hawaii, to Japan, to a backyard, thing with speakers on sticks. And you can make it work, or you can take it into a stadium or an arena and you can make that work just the same and give everyone a great. I've even started encouraging some of these younger acts, like just hire me and take 1D live and pay me what you're going to pay 2 people, because like that's where I'm at in my career. But hire a great single engineer with one great small single console, and I promise I'll blow everyone's mind. I promise everyone on stage will be happy. Everyone in the room will be happy, beyond happy, because this format allows for that. And in so many ways, the portability, the sub-ability sort of, the 1-to-1-to-1 per console size and per mix rack, what all of that offers, and just the tools available, the premium engineer mixing sort of tools on the Surface allow for you to do so much with a 25-pound console. And it is not prosumer. It is not below the level of, pro level large format consoles at all. It really isn't. It just is a more clever, more nimble, more agile package. Yeah. Which is something my artist had asked me for before. It's like, we have all this stuff. What happens when we want to be agile? When we want to go do that private that we can't fit the stuff into, or we want to go do a show, like we want to do a pop-up secret show at a House of Blues with a day's notice. And like, this is always the solution. And if you build on this, it can scale up to large scale production, but it also scales down and is portable in a way that I don't think any other manufacturer can say they are. I've seen some even releasing kind of answers to this size format hilariously. Right. But again, they're like, you're not 256, you're 80 channels now. You're not this, you're that.
You lose data.
Correct. There's
and so you can't use your same show file.
That's the problem.
That's why
you build for one or the other, and then you're screwed when you get to the other situation. Yeah. And Alan and
then you have 2 separate show files.
And that's the whole problem.
Which one is up to date?
Yep. And if you need to sub it out, God forbid, or you need to, again, if you were like my position, I'm PMing in front of house, an artist that trusts me with their life, but the monitor engineer and the playback, those are engineer du jour for some of these shows we had this year. You're really kind of screwed whenever you have your own conversion of file you're having to manage.
It's got that can't be part of the thing that changes show to show. Like, you have control over it, and like might as well take that out of your. You don't want to have to worry about that.
It is a huge variable you can delete from your workflow. Right. And even artist to artist, I would say, because of the way that the user presets import. And exactly. I mean, you really can set up a show file on this console
works for any...
that really pretty much does. I mean, I'm sure there are specific use cases that are way outside of your and my bounds, but I can't think of one.
If you're mixing
I've not ever touched any.
And monitors for a music artist.
Yes, correct.
Then you have a show file.
Yep.
If you're doing some other situation or
if it is
format,
not music or popular sounding music,
you'll have a different file. Well, like I have a different show file for my orchestra shows.
Yes, sure.
Because that is a very different situation.
But I was on a 1500. I used one of these for an orchestra show recently.
Yeah, there you go.
And took I had an acoustic file built for Dan and Shay, and took my acoustic file because it was the 2 of them and an acoustic guitar, 3 inputs, stuff. And then a 91-piece, very famous orchestra, to connect those things. And it worked brilliantly. It was perfect. Again, there were much larger sidecar. There were 3, 1,000+ channel consoles in the room as well. And I was on this tiny little sidecar of a console. But I was really I was touching what would arguably be the most important sources, and handing things back and forth via MADI, a MADI card and the mix rack. And it worked. It just worked brilliantly. It was simple and easy. And it was fantastic. And I was able to record it too very quickly and easily, and it just worked. And that was a format I hadn't had to do on this console before. So again, I think for most anyone that is watching this that is interested at all in Allen and Heath, it does it, and it deletes the variable of I have to have supplementation. I promise you don't. I promise you don't. You may want it, and I may want some next year. And when you can afford to have it, that's awesome. But it makes your show, less versatile, less deployable. You don't have to have it, and you don't have to worry about a different size console not working. One of the things you told me when you were really teaching me about this console and getting me up to speed and certified and all that is if it says D Live on it, it works together. That's all you need to know. And that was like, wow, that's so simple, right? I can think of plenty of other brands where it's like, if it says these 4 letters on it or these whatever, this,
If it has this
might work.
brand name on it,
It might work and it might not. And this might work with that, but you have to have this. And if this only works, that only works with this series, but it works into this series. Well, you build it on that console, but this one has 2 DSP cards, not 3, or that you have this acronym slot and not that acronym slot available in this and not that. Even that's huge in this format, is that the consoles and mix racks have the same slot. That's such a silly thing that a lot of manufacturers don't do.
And it's
it's huge, and it takes a lot of the guesswork out. And you can even swap things around, or if you're on a tour where you have D Live on both sides of the snake, you may have 5, 6, 7 cards between you. And
so you brought up a good point, and it's honestly one of the after the show file, I know the show file is going to load on any mix rack, any surface. That's huge. Number one.
Huge.
No file conversion. You don't lose any data.
Yep.
So the data's all there. One of the most brilliant ways they accomplish that is by keeping all the I/O sockets the same numbers across every surface, every mix rack, which you alluded to with the I/O slots. It's the same number slot, which is why it works between different surfaces.
Correct. And even if you were using virtual sound check, let's say a Waves card, a SoundGrid card one day, and a Dante card the other day, the slot is still the slot. If it's slot 2 and your kick is in 1, it doesn't matter which card it is. The kick's still going to show up there in your DAW of choice. Yeah. That's brilliant, and it's
even if it's a
simple.
different slot, if you're using virtual, it's one button to slot 2 to 3, just flip over.
Correct.
Because all the slots have equal capability,
which is incredible. Yeah, I mean it's a no-brainer, and it's very simple. Some manufacturers do try to do that with their platforms to streamline to some degree, but many times they become very proprietary in the process. And I think the format options available on DLive are sort of like everything you'd want. I still prefer it because what I care about the most is how it sounds, the portability, the reliability, the repeatability, which is exactly what we were talking about. And I love the offering of the card slots, right? I think there's a great stable of everything you really want and need. The card selection is incredible. The mix rack I/O ports, sure, if you were in like the C series mix racks and consoles versus the S and D series mix rack and surfaces, you have more or less locally, but that's the only difference.
And the numbers stay the same, and the data's all there.
Yep.
When you go to patch, the patches from the other ports that you don't have are still
that's
there,
even at first I didn't understand that on this size console. It's like, why is slot 2 the first slot? But it's like, well, it's because you've lost a slot going from a larger console, but it has set you up so that you are probably still 1-to-1. And that's such a gracious thing that the engineers at Allen and Heath thought of in the implementation of this
and it
workflow.
Means there's no conforming ports. There's no
lack of conforming is it's huge, and I have to do that with ports, and this port to that port, and speaking of,
as long as you plug it in the right place.
I remember one of your questions was, and this builds on where we are here, sort of like what was something you were proud of you'd done with sort of DLive recently. We did a show in Wilmington, North Carolina at their newer outdoor amphitheater. It's a beautiful space. I think it's like owned by the city. I don't think it's owned by like a mega whatever thing, but it's a beautiful space in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's right there on the river. Really nice spot, great spot. And we had a really great show, but it was for a very large company that brought a very large truck to do a very large live stream of it to their constituents, and we found out about that not that long before, and it was some contention about whether it would get approved. So that meant my existing DLive package I'd only done a handful of shows on, I needed to suddenly add I/O in both directions to both send and receive from a truck a broadcast mix, but also they've never heard this before, and it's a full set, and I have to trust them. So my artist and I spoke, and I said, I would like to give them like dummy-proof stems with as much baked in as possible. Like I'm going to give them a drum stem. That's literally like all the drums, all the perk, the side chaining I spoke about earlier between, perk stems and the drum kit. I want all of that baked together. I don't want them to be able to make like an 808 3 times more bandwidth than the kick drum. That's a mistake they may make, and they may not hear it until 5 songs in the set, and it's too late.
Yeah.
And they may not hear that in sound check. We may not do that numbers, right? So I'm going to bake it all together as much as possible and give them like 16 stems. And it was awesome, and it worked really well. But what was interesting was speccing DLive gear to do that. And a lot of manufacturers have these little satellite boxes and whatever that can do that, but doing it in a way that was affordable, that didn't completely screw my truck pack, because I had a small box truck for this one coming from Nashville to Wilmington. I had to make it fit. I'd already gotten a quote, gotten it approved by everybody. So, I couldn't really add racks of stage racks or whatever like you would conventionally have to do in this situation. And we ended up adding a DX rack. You'll have to tell me, can you help me with model numbers?
DX32?
That was it, correct.
Okay.
So that one's awesome because it's, 4 banks of 8 and they can be input or output. So we did 24 outputs and 8 inputs. We used the prime cards, which are very neat. So that's sort of like the highest quality AD and DA that, Alan and Heath makes for this format. And then I had another great engineer, Michael Meckling, as our monitor engineer, but that was his first or second show with us. So this was new to him. This was new to me. He had worked on Alan and Heath a lot too, but he was sort of like, I don't know, like the port to port, how are we going to, what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And we have to do it there. So we get there, no time for rehearsal, no time to do it before then. So we get there. This is unprepped. The gear rolls out. And within 30 minutes, we were able to figure all of this out and have all of it going. And everything went one-to-one. And the patching was so intuitive. The port-to-port patching on consoles can get scary for engineers. It can, right? We sometimes send our talk back from monitors to front house back and forth. And that's all we do. And then we're like, F this, I don't know. Yeah. Like, because to them, on that side of the snake, it's called this, but it means that. And on this side of the snake, like there is this decoder ring sort of language, linguistically, right. Like the nomenclature changes depending on which side of the snake you're on. And so you're like, no, bro, it's this. And they're like, no, man, it's not. I don't think so. I can't find it. It's not working. We set it up the way we thought it would work with our brains, having not used DLive a lot, and it just freaking worked. And it sounded great. And it sounded great in the truck. And that was huge for a very advanced use case. To just be uncluttered and to just work is exactly what I want from a console manufacturer. Even the stimming out and the way the console's laid out. We talked about group to group and some things I'm doing like that earlier, but it did not take me a lot of time, maybe 15 minutes of looking at my console to create some more auxes and some more this and that, pick-off points essentially, to make sure that I was sending broadcast exactly what they needed, that it had the right amount of processing, but not too. For example, I wanted to send them Dan's vocal and Shay's vocal, and I wanted all my vocal processing intact, but I didn't want them to have spatial effects. And I didn't want those two things to be married together. And then also, hey, I have a little bit of processing on a mono lead vocal bus, and that's too late of a pickoff point maybe. So those types of things, the console accommodated that in a way that was not, because and I was PMing too, right? So I'm getting questions about the video wall, questions about the lighting, questions about the pit. And there's this whole broadcast element and noise happening about that while I am trying to make my console do this thing that I've not made it do before. And I was able to. And I'm super proud of that. And I think the show sounded great. It was one of those outdoor, outside air shows where you can live at 99 all night. The weather was beautiful. There were like 7,000 or 8,000 kids there, which is definitely an underplay for Dan and Shay. But they were there to see them, and they were stoked, and they were loud, and they were singing along. And we had a really nice PA that sounded great, and that was deployed pretty well. I had to trust the format, and it exceeded my expectations in terms of sounding great and just accommodating everything I needed it to for a whole nother, almost like a whole nother console's worth of duties right off my console without getting in the way of me being able to mix a great front of house mix and have a great time mixing. And I don't know that I've had a console do that for me in that way. Usually I'm sacrificing something about my mix flow in the room to accommodate that broadcast mix, or I feel like I've given them 80% of what I want to give them, but it's not really what I want to give them. So if anything, I kind of disappointed the broadcast mix engineer because he was like, I don't have a lot to do. Everything sounds like music already. Like, he gave me food groups and you're riding the solos, and you made sure that like the guitar group was downwind of your solo ride. So like, and I'm like, well, yeah, you don't know the music, so I have to do that. But I know you were bored. Sorry, buddy. Right. It's not, I don't trust you. You don't know the music, and I do. And so, it worked exactly how it was supposed to. There were no gotchas, no BS. It deployed quickly and easily. We just rolled it out of the truck and we plugged it in, and we routed it how we thought it maybe was supposed to work with our best idea, having used the console a dozen times. And it worked. And it worked perfect. That is, I think, a pretty massive indication that the consoles are built. Once you learn the couple, I won't even say quirks, but just once you embrace the workflow, and it is not super strained. It's not right-hand drive like some other desks I've used where you're just like, I'm in the upside down. What do I? And you have to really learn like Mandarin to know the console. Some of my favorite desks are like that, but it takes like 4 weeks to learn it. This desk is not like that, but once you kind of just, again, embrace it, there definitely is everything you need there. Sonically and from like an expander and I/O perspective too. So,
yeah. Well, that's the most glowing review could ever ask.
Not to be a fanboy. I mean, I didn't go into it thinking that. I've seen all these people, all these hip club tours, and these guys like, here's my snare bomb button on my DLive console. And I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. But then I go see some of those guys do shows, or I hear their mixes even on a phone, and I'm like, sounds really good. And then I go look at their front of house rack, and I'm like, it's just a DLive console. I got to work harder. I have all this stuff around me. I got to work harder. You know, your mix was like that with Ben Rector when you were before us, you know, on the Twin years.
I had this.
You had that. Yeah. And that was it. That was it. And I had everything in the world. And, you know, I think the things I had afforded me some privileges in certain rooms at how loud I needed to mix to meet the crowd, different use case, different needs I had, right? But you had been sounding fantastic in big rooms with nothing else. That's it, right? And so that even inspired me all the more this year to go into the year like that. It's like, you know, he can do it. I know I can do it. But like, get back to the basics. Get back to the meat and potatoes. I love saying like a vanilla console package. Like, can you make your artist sound, your mix work with a vanilla console package? If you can't, then like, what are you doing having your artist pay for that console package? What's the point of renting that console?
Right.
And there are a lot like that. I mean, I did a show for dear friends at the beginning of this year. It was a cool like reunion throwback emo thing. It was awesome, a lot of fun. I wanted to use D-Live, and we ended up with a different manufacturer that a very large vendor has a whole lot of, so they give away for a very low weekly cost.
Yeah.
These things happen. And so I was like, cool, I know the console well. I'll make it work. I used to use it with Dan Shay. I'll make it work. And right away, the disappointment of like, oh yeah, this is what this console sounds like. And then they sent a Wave server, and I was like, man, I kind of don't really love the Waves. Not to disparage Waves. I don't want to have to use a plugin server. To me, they're addictive. They're like almost like the fast food of mixing. It's like you just want more and more and more, but you never really get satisfied. And you never really get the thing that you need. It's never like a premium gourmet meal. It's always like a Big Mac. And it's like kind of good for a minute, but like you don't want it again for a week because you feel kind of dirty after using it. That's just me personally. But that was all that worked natively easily with the console. So that was what they sent. And that was just and it just had a sound. No matter what I did, I felt like I just had, you know, this thing. With that manufacturer console. And we were doing monitors for an house from the same desk, and we just kept putting these limitations of what it could do. And it wasn't even like that was cheaper than D-Live, you know, from a renting perspective. I think they just had such availability, and the word is out. Vendors, you need to stock up on D-Live because people are asking for it. Because of all the reasons we've already said,
right.
It is the ideal format for like 80% of touring artists out there, I think, really. There are certainly use cases where something may be more tweaky, more ideal, whatever. No one solution fits every workflow, but this solution fits so many workflows and so many use cases for so many artists out there performing live music. I really think the D-Live format is kind of leading the baton in innovation right now in terms of removing obstacles for engineers and for artists to have a consistent and fantastic experience. So I would encourage other engineers that are considering the format or on different manufacturers to give it a try, give it a go the next time you're able to. I think you'll be really impressed. And I'm excited to be talking about it. You know, I'm not affiliated. I'm passionate because I think it enables music and creators and, you know, engineers and artists in a way that we have not been in a long time in the live sphere.
Sweet. Well, dude, Taylor, thanks for hanging out.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for watching.
Yeah, a pleasure to talk about, you know, a platform that I'm passionate about. I think that Alan and Heath folks are doing a lot of great stuff, and I'm glad to get to work with you, Jake. You know, you're a great engineer turned into a console guy and a rep for a company that I like a lot, and so that even speaks highly to Alan and Heath, is that they're hiring folks to inform decisions and to work with people like me who are engineers first.
Right.
So,
and I still get to mix.
You still are a great
awesome.
Engineer, yeah, that I would trust to mix anybody in the world. So truly, man. So thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to talk with someone with a big brain and a great spirit like you. So thanks for having me here.